Welcome, everyone, to a special episode, pre-recorded episode of Weekly Dharma Gathering. Today's session is a recorded conversation with Dharma, yogic, and Lukumi teacher, Sheryl Petty, author of the fantastic book, Ocha Dharma, The Relationship Between Lukumi and African-Based Tradition and Buddhist Practice, by Movement Tapestries, out in 2016. You can find more about Dr. Petty and her work at ochadharma.org. I'm going to put that in the chat. I don't know if people can see it, but ochadharma.org. So today's session, you all can view for free, but I'd also like to welcome any dana or donations or heart gift for Dr. Petty. It can be sent to me actually in my Venmo or PayPal. So I'll just put my link tree in there and just let me know it's for Dr. Petty or for Weekly Dharma Gathering. And I will make sure it gets to Dr. Petty. Great. So welcome, Sheryl, and thank you so much for joining us on Weekly Dharma Gathering.
So appreciative, so grateful to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to start with like the basic bio question. If you can tell us and our audience a little bit about yourself and how you found your various spiritual paths.
Oh wow, that's a big question. I can say a little bit about myself, how I found the spiritual path. That's everyone has a big story, right? It's a big story. So I am an organizational healer. That is what I spend most of my time doing, and which is where most of my sort of dharmic activity, I get to be a catalyst for large-scale institutional, national, and global change, where folks are actually stuck and they cannot get through barriers and blockages. And much of that is around racial healing. Much of that is around systemic racism. And I love what I do. It is my calling, and it found me, interestingly. So all around the same time, probably early to mid 90s, my career and both of my spiritual paths, my primary path, sort of emerged simultaneously. I was in seminary, actually. I was in, many people don't know that story. I was in Christian seminary.
Wow.
Yeah, because I was thinking to myself, I had come from a sort of background in math and philosophy, and I started asking questions about why are things the way that they are? And why is there so much suffering? Why am I hurting? Why are people hurting? Why is my family hurting? I'm from Detroit. And that was Detroit in the 80s, late 80s.
Wow.
And early 90s, and was having lots of experiences about what is this world? What is life? What am I doing here? What is my calling? And the only understanding I had of depth spiritual practice was really monasticism. So I thought, oh, maybe I'm going to be like a nun. Maybe I'll join, maybe that's what I'll do. I knew about Buddhism. I knew about Hinduism and Taoism and these things, but I didn't really know anything other than Christianity. And so actually, I got a calling. Literally, I had a visionary experience where I was told seminary. And my first thought was, why would I do that? Like, that doesn't even make any sense. Like, I am kind of Christian, like a little bit, but why would I do that? And so I was like, let me just stop arguing. I'm going to stop fighting with it, and I'm just going to go. So I ended up going to Graduate Theological Union in the Bay Area of California, San Francisco Bay Area, and was in seminary and got a master's in systematic and philosophical theology, and started praying for what is next. Have great respect and honor for all wisdom traditions. The depth of practice of, and particularly I was drawn to, of course, Christian mysticism and that path. Yeah. But I was like, this isn't my calling. What's my thing? And you can tell me if you want a shorter version of this story. But in the midst of that, I ran into a person I had known, and she said, you should go, check out this place, which ended up being a sort of spiritual advice place, which is a first entree for people into many African-based lineages, which is called a botanica. And I was like, sure, I'll check it out. What's that? One thing led to another. I ended up getting much advice and many readings. and eventually became a priest. And in the first year of my priesthood, I again started having a set of experiences, shall we say,
Yes.
where Tantric Buddhism found me. I did not know that there was such a thing. My only understanding of Buddhism would be very, kind of the monastic or more sutric approaches, if those terms are sensible to folks.
Yep.
Sort of you practice for, you get calm. Calm is
Yes.
good. I like it. But I was like, yeah, so this modality of practice found me, and one thing led to another, and I found a teacher who was a teacher of Vajrayana, a Dzogchen based teacher of Vajrayana, woman, highly rare, right?
Yes.
And that was how I started practicing deeply. So my first teacher was a Vajrayana Dzogchen teacher.
Wow.
And that is how my journey started.
That's so great. I'm so, interested in this connection that it's organic, and it's experiential, and it's spiritual, and it's visionary, but you've also done something very profound. So, your book, as you probably know, and as far as I know, is really it's the only one of its kind. And I found your book a few years ago because I was and am doing research on the relationship between the concept of Ashe in both African-based spirituality and religions and in Tantric Buddhism. And, this research had started, I had a conversation with Dr. Galen Ferguson, who was a student of Trungpa Rinpoche. I know, of course, Trungpa Rinpoche's work and legacy. And, many years ago, maybe in the 80s, I haven't been in the 80s, and Trungpa Rinpoche died in 87. Galen was saying, Galen was one of the only Black students, and really, anyway. And he had told me that he had asked Trungpa Rinpoche, because Africa was so absent in the kind of Vajradhatu, Shambhala, and Tantric broadly concept, whereas, they would name sort of indigenous North American stuff, and of course Europe and Asia, and it was like, well, there's this other place,
kind of a big place. I mean, there's like a continent,
a big place with a lot of influence,
a lot of countries.
And I was like, yeah, a lot of countries, a lot of tribes, a lot of religions. And I know that Galen had gone to Nigeria, and of course, Ashe was everywhere in Yoruba, but he couldn't really find the connection. And I remember when I first came in, when I was in Shambhala, and I saw this, and I was like, what's that? And they're like, Ashe. And I was like, Ashe. And so your book, when I was doing research, really came up, and it's really one of the few readily available resources, right? Like, without going to, deep archives or traveling to other countries, that I could even find, even putting these things in conversation, right? African religion, Africa in general, and Buddhism together. And so I'm wondering what inspired you to write this book. How did this book project come about?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, I mean, I will share another story, and some of these things, I'm selective about. We all have our deep journeys. Our
Sure,
every person is a profundity, because that's just the nature of reality, right? It's all very deep. So I will share this story because it matters. I was on a train, the Metro North train, for New Yorkers. I was on the Metro North coming to or from somewhere, my home, a little bit north of New York City. And this was about 20 years into my practices, these parallel lineages. And literally, I was looking out of the window, and something said, you should write a book about the relationship between these two systems. And I was like, why would I do that? How could I possibly, why would I do something like that? And then I had to sit with myself for a moment, because, when we listen, we're not here alone. There are multiple levels of being and reality, right, in consciousness. So, and so, folks were sort of patient with me, shall we say. And I was like, okay, it has been a couple of decades, perhaps maybe I do have something to say. And if this is being asked of me, then, it's my responsibility to be responsive, to
Sure.
be
Yes.
in integrity and to try to do good, to try to be of service, to try to be of support.
Mm-hmm.
And so it feels, even telling the story feels very moving because, it's an honor to be able to offer something that could be a resource to someone else because there's no calculation that can describe what I have received. There is no way to quantify what the benefit that I have experienced. So this is an opportunity to, pay it forward, to offer something of that. And if folks can find the trailhead or the beginning of the trickle of the stream or the river, let it be so, right? Let me not be a blockage to that. So that was this is what happened. And I was like, okay, let me be a conduit for letting this book come through me, letting something happen. And, you write a book like this or many, perhaps many of the things, I don't know about all, but maybe very many, the vast majority of when we all try to craft these things, we have to be in synchronicity and relationship to what is trying to come through, or run the risk of distorting it, or run the risk of getting it wrong. And there were times when I was writing it when it was like, oh, no, da, 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 fix that. And I was like, and you just feel it. You're like, you gotta. And so it was really that process of being, committing to being present and attentive enough because this is not just about me.
Yes. What has the response been to your book that you've been privy to?
That's so interesting. I don't know. So I would say people write to me fairly regularly, little notes or requests or questions or kudos. People will say things to me periodically. I'll see, I'll get sort of the notifications of someone who's purchased, like I don't know who, but I get the notifications of purchase. But in general, it feels like a steady but little stream, a steady but little trickle stream. And my commitment was to put something out there. I don't sort of have an agenda. I actually don't have an agenda. I really am following the current of the river. I don't have an objective here, actually, with the exception of wanting to make access to certain methodologies for practice more readily available. I am very interested in the methods of tantric Buddhism and the wisdom of African-based traditions being accessible to those for whom those methods will be liberating, can help us find our own natural freedom. I'm very interested in that. And however that happens, I'm in service of and support of.
Oh, that's great. So can you say a little bit more about what you're currently doing with your organization, Ocha Dharma, and the classes or the kind of community that you're building or encouraging to grow?
Yeah. So Ocha Dharma is a part of my actual, consulting practice, which is Movement Tapestries.
Okay.
And as I mentioned at the beginning, I actually have a full-time consulting practice where I literally work in a highly emotionally demanding. I mean, you can imagine, right? The proliferation of awareness of racial equity and injustice in light of, more visible recognition of murder, Black and Brown and other oppressed people has made it so that what was already in high demand has quadrupled. So I love what I do because it's an opportunity for organizations that have a very huge footprint and can impact, and whose work impacts tens of millions of people around the world to get more liberated and to get those systems unstuck. So that, just to give the umbrella, that's the blanket within which. And then this notion of the website and Ocha Dharma, as more people would ask and people would say, well, where do I, what happens if I want to do some more? There have been times in my life, particularly in my Lukumi practice, when I, have mentored or supported people. There was a period of time where I was doing a lot of holding ceremony, a lot of regular public ceremony, primarily in African-based practice. at that time. And more recently, I've shifted more into my profession, as I've described, which is my practice as well. It's not separate. But the notion of the website really is responding to, some folks who have said, hey, what might I? And it again is an offering, and it's for those who are looking for it. So I'm not a big marketer. I'm not like I'm not a social media, like I know what the things are, but I'm not like an Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. I just resurrected my LinkedIn account like a couple weeks ago, had to dust it off and, dig stuff out of it. Think about, is it still relevant? And that has been useful. But really, Otodharma is for those who are looking for it.
Yeah.
Not that I'm trying to hide or keep something, but I'm not like trying to, I would like to be in practice with people regularly. But, I want, as you well know, many of you, there's something about, so many of these traditions are call and response. So there's something about the call, I'm waiting for a call such that I'm responding. Do you see what I'm saying? It's like,
yes,
I want to meet the call where it is. And I feel like I am right now. So there have been a few little baby gatherings, where a few folks have been very kind and come. Some folks even asking, can we meet more regularly? And I'm like, I don't know that I fully have the bandwidth for a weekly.
Yeah.
I probably have the bandwidth for monthly, but I'm really feeling out, what is the call?
Yeah.
So that I can respond accordingly. I think I'll stop there. Yeah.
It's so interesting you say that. As you were talking, I was thinking about, I think like you and like Carla Jackson Brewer are maybe the only teachers I know of who are in, an African-based tradition as well as a tantric tradition. There are some other teachers I know. Sensei Zenju or Emmanuel's also does indigenous and African-based as well as Zen, but it's the tantric African connection is what, of course, as a Vajrayana practitioner, as a tantrika, as a sadhika, is really fascinating to me. And of course, there's all this research now. I am, working on this special issue for the Arrow Journal, and there are a few essays that are under review now that are about this, the research. Some of it's empirical research, some of it's historical research about actually Buddhism's African roots. And, I think that's like very shocking to some people, or it's very off-putting. And I'm really thinking about the growth of Black Buddhist teachers, even though Black Buddhists, tantric Buddhists, but Black Buddhists in general, it's a fairly small population. The impact of Black Buddhist teachers, who almost every Black Buddhist Dharma teacher, including myself, it's not just Buddhism, they're bringing other, whether it's Christianity, whether it's African-based religions, whether it's Islam, whether it's, Judaism, whatever it is, whether it's different kinds of practices, indigenous practices. And there's something very powerful about that, and very inviting, right? It's not rigid. And even in your book, you talk about, and this is one of the things I loved about Shambhala, is the Bun religion, the Tibetan indigenous religion is folded into Himalayan, Buddhism. It's not, it's not separate. And I'm just wondering, I know you say your work is more, your path is more manifesting in the work you do in the world. But I'm curious if you have any thoughts about this kind of rise of the prominence, at least in my experience, of teachers who are Black and Buddhist, and are kind of changing the way that Buddhist practice gets embodied.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I want to go back to the way you began this first part, which was around the tantric African connection, because I find that to be, what draws and keeps me. The link to that feels very clear to me. And that's the only form of Buddhism I've ever practiced. So, I can only credibly speak to these, particular modalities. I also practice Bun. as well. Began practicing, but about 10 years ago. You know, I'm able to share some practices that are based in that lineage. So the tantric African-based connection feels very strong and clear because essentializing it, Black people have lives of intensity. Right, we have a sort of, there are moments of calm, but there's a day-to-day experience, you know, whether that's generational lineage, where their life is very intense. There's an intense, right? I mean, just, you know, to live in these societies, you know, where just to be present and to breathe, and to be seen as human, and worthy and present requires a kind of labor and work, right? And so from my perspective, spiritual practice has to be able to meet that fully, in order for us to be able to be liberated and free. And so, you know, Tantra is about the totality of life, right? In every aspect, there's nothing that one doesn't engage in its transmutational, you know, transformative aspect. That every single aspect of what we're experiencing, we can bring to bear. So, you know, the hard, the ugly, without trying to calm it down.
Right.
Do you know what I'm saying? Like there's the and I think of the you know, the wisdom families, sometimes called the Buddha families. Right. You know, there's peaceful, there's wrathful, there's enriching, there's powerful. There's African-based tradition, and Lukumi is the one that I'm most familiar with, has that as an aspect of how one, you know, functions, how one engages. Sometimes the wind blows soft, sometimes the wind blows hard. I can dance with all of that. I can dance in a fierce, intense way, and I can be really soothing and calm in the full modality of that, without having to tame myself in a restricted way. You know, there's something to be said for taming that is liberating, and there's something that can be said for taming that is distorted. You know, that's a distortion of that method. So this is how I think of the, you know, the intersection, and what I feel like, you know, people, Black and Brown people, may be asking for and needing in some aspects in some of our past. You know, I hesitate to say a blanket statement about everybody and all Black people and all BIPOC people, because no. And there are different times in life where we want and need different things, but there's something about being able to bring the full totality and modality of methodologies to practice, grounded in bodhicitta, which I have to say, so if that term is not familiar with folks, you know, watching, you know, this is about our own enlightened heart mind, you know, at an absolute level, and at another level, really about our enlightened intention, you know, our altruistic, you know, intention that this work and practice is not just about my freedom, and it's also not just about my people's freedom either. It's about the freedom and liberation of everything, everywhere, period. My work, just FYI, I mostly work with white dominant organizations. I mostly work with organizations that are steeped in really dominant culture thinking, that have lost touch with what it is to be human and connected, which is why they're causing so much freaking harm.
It's very true.
So this notion of reconnected and connectedness, you know, one of the terms is gyu, which is sort of continuum, right? Tantra, the continuum, which is about connectivity. How do we re-yoke or reconnect or remember the innate connectedness of things, ourselves, each other, the totality of life, so that flow, ache, lung, can flow appropriately, and that nourishment itself brings the cells that have been dried up and atrophied back to life, so that our natural wisdom emerges automatically. You can't stop it once you unleash that. It cannot be stopped. There is ache.
Yes, so beautifully said. Thank you. And I think, you know, so much of what you were talking about, this aspect that, you know, the wisdom neurosis, right? There are two sides of the same coin. And, you know, I think particularly, you know, we say the West, but I really, in the US, there's a real sense of a disability to be with, like both the neurosis and the wisdom, right? It's like you got to either capture, it's like too much identification with either, and I think that this has a lot to do with the purposeful separation of people from indigeneity, right? To enter into whiteness, you have to give up indigeneity, and then you separate other people from their indigeneity in order to capture them into that system. And that makes it really hard when you encounter a system like Tantra, for instance, and you try to kind of latch on to someone else's indigenous culture, and that doesn't work. It's like my mom used to say, she was a very, religious Pentecostal woman, and she used to say, God doesn't have any grandchildren. And I was like, what does that mean? But it's kind of this you have to have an intimacy with that practice, yourself, right? And it can't be borrowed from someone else. It can't be like, and it has to be your own experience of that thing. And I really, for me, in the last, few years, it's really been turning to more cultural and indigenous practices. And that's been the way my tantric Buddhist practice has been expressing itself. And it feels really authentic. That feels like, Lungta, that feels like Wind Horse, that feels like Ashe, and, for a lot of in a lot of white dominated spaces, they see that as,
mixing stuff up or
not
something.
pure, not pure. And I was like, well, if you look at Tantra, what's pure about you got Hinduism, you've got Bun, you've got all kinds, you got people's own shamanic experiences, and then it becomes a lineage, and but the lineage is meant to grow and flower and propagate and shift and change, and how you kind of know it is by what the result is, So I'm really interested in this, thing you were talking about connection back to our connecting back to our all of our lineages, and that then inspires us to want to be deeply human, to want to be deeply invested in every being, past, present, and future's liberation.
Yeah, I mean, this is making me think of a few things. One of them, when you started about this inability to be with both the neurosis and the wisdom, right? Non-dual, right? That they're not dual, they're co-emergent, they're arising simultaneously. My first teacher used to say there's a flicker, there's flickering, they're flickering in and out, right? There are many mudras that one does to demonstrate the relationship between emptiness and form, or you know what I'm saying? Like these aspects that are happening, they're constantly arising. And the neurosis comes when we latch on, right? The neurosis is a gripping, like the problem is gripping, not that things are arising. So what's interesting to me, you said something about when folks start practicing Tantra, they start practicing Vajrayana, and what I immediately thought of, I just love this because it's like I can feel it, right? Can you feel it? Like this notion of Lung or Ache moving, right? Even in this conversation. So when one enters a set of practices like this, whether you enter it through African-based traditions or Vajrayana or Bun or any other, wisdom tradition, which has sort of tantric methodologies and approaches, it is inescapable. It's like a tidal wave.
Yes.
You are overcome by sensation, literally by sensation. We're talking, we do, in Tantra, as many of you know, we do much with the subtle body at certain levels of practice, right? And so we're talking about winds and channels, right? Ta, long, right? We're talking about ta, long. And so we're talking about how to get things unstuck through the channels, right, in the body, unstuck in terms of our channels with each other, unstuck in terms of our channels with, with life, with lineage. This is about flow. We're talking about how to get things, like literally think about rivulets. A river, there's rivers in the body, there's rivers on the planet, there's rivers between us. And what happens when rivers are clogged? You get disease, you get dysfunction, you get community strife, you get death, you get paralysis, like there's all kinds of, you get, you know, ecosystem stagnation, like all of these things happen. So we do, you know, at certain levels of Tantra, we do Tsalung practices, which are part of the offerings on Ocha Dharma, FYI, in order to clear up and remove blockages from the Ache, you know, the prana, the lung in the system moving smoothly, because that itself is hydrating. Right, it's hydrating, it's nourishing, right, to allow things to you know, have their natural, you know, have their natural movement. So that's what I was thinking of. And the other thing, you know, back to this notion of continuity, you know, and you talked about Black people or people of African descent, and what Buddhist teachers are bringing in, you know, this notion of lineage and ancestors, you know, right, which is core and central, particularly to Lukumi practice, and many other, I can't speak for all African-based traditions, but many, this notion of, you know, lineage, we, you know, in Buddhism, we call lineage all the time. You know, we're calling lineage all the time. You do the same thing in Lukumi, we're calling lineage all the time. We're calling blood lineage, and we're calling practice lineage. Right. So and it's not that everybody in my lineage is, you know, we're engaging with their lives from a state of clarity. It is that I have this body, and that has connectivity to that lineage. And so all my prayers are about their liberation and also benefiting from their wisdom as well. So, you know, like there was a wisdom being, I was at a Bembe, which is a Orisha ceremony. Orisha is the long word for Ocha. Ocha is an elision. It's a condensed term from the longer word Orisha or Richa. And I was at a ceremony, a Bembe, and a wisdom being there, whose name is Ochun, said, you know, we didn't come from an egg. And what I took that to mean, and what I'm taking that to mean in this conversation is there is a sense of continuity, you know, in lineage, and being present to that, right? Feet on the ground. And this is back to connectivity, which can heal us. If I could say one more thing, I know I'm going on and on. If I could say one more
this is
thing.
beautiful. Oh my goodness, please do go on and on.
in my work, a lot of what we talk about, you know, so I do equity, I do, you know, racial and other forms of equity, you know, practice. And a lot of what we talk about when I'm working with organizations is how to get unnumb, you know, how to get unnumb. So, you know, when your hand goes to sleep or your foot goes to sleep, right, you cannot feel. We are desensitized. We're desensitized to what is happening if at the foot, you know, if I kick the foot, you know, I can't feel it. If I kick someone with that foot, I cannot feel it. Right. So, you know, for me, deep equity practice and dharmic practice are the same. The deeper one goes, you find yourself at, you know, a liberated state, you know, our most fundamental, you know, human goodness, we find that. And so this is about unnumbing, and we're back to, you know, this sense of, you know, connectivity and continuity and lineage, and maybe what many African-based teachers or teachers of African descent or BIPOC teachers or anybody is trying to do is this notion of reconnecting, because your profound words, which I had to highlight in my notes here, you said to enter into whiteness, you have to give up indigeneity. And that is a deep statement. And this is about the cutting off of, you know, what are we doing to ourselves and what are we doing to the planet? And it's not necessary. And I'm going to say one more thing, and then I'll pause and would love to hear what you're thinking. When we start practicing something like Vajrayana or Tantra in other manifestations, or we start reconnecting, we start waking up the foot, or connecting circuits that have been shunted or broken. Some of those circuits have been broken and we're rewiring them. And some of them have been crimped, you know, like a crimp in a hose, right? Yep. We're opening up that flow. Now, we all know what happens when you plug something into the wall and we're not prepared for it. The flow can overwhelm the senses and the system. Herein lies the sophistication of practice to allow us to be ready for the flow of current, which we may have been numb to This is why when you go into sort of deeper levels of Vajrayana practice, you have to become accustomed to the intensity of current. Some people are like, I'm just not used to feeling so much. I'm used to compartmentalizing and numbing. And so we have to get accustomed to the sensation of greater flow. And we can't overwhelm ourselves because we can short circuit the system. We can, where it's like, I need some time off. Oh my God, I can't attend to this. I got kids, I got to go to work. People got things to do.
That's right.
It's like, so make sure that we have to be skillful in how we move at a pace. And this is why it is said wisely that, at certain levels of practice, it is critical that one has some relationship at depth to teacher, however one understands what that is. And one could say many things about it. Many people have, some people you've interviewed may have, but there's a way that we need to be highly skillful so that we do not overwhelm our ability to engage with the fullness of things, practice. There's much more that could be said there, but we have to be skillful, so that we're appropriate. Yeah.
I agree. I mean, it's interesting in many ways. I hear a lot of in dominant kind of Buddhism, this kind of idea of like the age of the teacher or the age of the guru is kind of over and it's community. And I agree that like Sangha there's a lot of growth, that happens in Sangha. Sangha is the irritant jewel, right? It's very important, right? Because it's like testing all my little, thoughts I have about myself. And at the same time in Tantra, where there are tigers, lions, and bears, oh my, on the path, and all kinds, and you're coming into contact with all kinds of energies. I also think this is where lineage is so important, both practice lineage and kinship lineage and blood lineage, because there's a grounding there, right? There's a kind of grounding there. And there's also the ability to heal backwards, heal beings that are still in trouble, left this reality in some trouble and confusion. But what you say is so true, because I've seen people go really crazy. I've seen people lose the kind of they're in the law, right? The LHA, and they've lost the kind of Nien and Lu quality. They've lost the earthy quality. And one of my teachers, Lama Rat Owens, talks so much about the earth, right? And that Buddhism is an earth-based practice, and people aren't really used to hearing that. The Buddha touched the earth and said, the earth is my witness. And so like that aspect of it, everyone wants to be in the sky, but it's like, you have to have, there's no waking up without the earth, right? And that also is our commitment. We have to take care of her. We have to honor her. And that disconnect between both our earthliness and the earth as our home creates, as you said, all kinds of trouble, where we're terrifying animals and we're polluting our the very things that keep us alive, air, water, and food, and the kind of the care, right? Or for other people, for other beings, for our home, for ourselves, for our lineage is somehow been politicized, so that it's, you make fun of people who care about others, or you make fun of people who care about how we experience existence, right? If we're all going to be born and we're going to experience suffering and sickness, old age, and death, well, it doesn't have to be a shitty experience. What I mean? It doesn't have to be a terrible experience. It could actually be a really incredible experience, and we're going to experience things that are challenging. But anyway, so this, we were talking about this idea. I feel like one of the things that just in the last month or two, I've been having these experiences where, I have a guru, and then I have maybe that's a whole other story, but, and then my root guru who lit my butter lamp, awesome. And now I have two teachers I'm working with, who are both Kagyu guys. And in the last, this year, I've gotten two different nundros. So, I had one nundro I did, a few years ago, and now I'm like, oh, there's so much, this is endless. And there's a depth to this that's so beautiful. and that's so powerful, and that is so connected, and I find that to be very inspiring rather than it being like daunting. I'm like, the depth of this ocean, or the depth of this sky, this universe, it's endless.
Yes.
And I love it. I think it's so great. And I try to tell my students, look, we're all going to die in the middle of a project.
Oh my God.
None of them, they're not going to all be wrapped. We're going to die in the middle of doing something. Everything is not going to be wrapped up. So just enjoy it, because,
wow.
there's no such thing as getting your affairs in order. That's no such thing in terms of,
I love it.
Right. So they're like, man, you're, I'm like, it's like, it's like, we just got to enjoy this shit, and I think, I remember when I started reading your book, and I thought, I have to like talk to this woman, because you see something. I mean, you said that it was very clear to you, but you see something that is completely opaque to other people. Like, it's completely like, what? They have no idea. Now, some people feel
what is it?
Some people feel it. They feel, like Black people I talk to, and other people of color will be like, I feel this connection between Africa, and it's very clear. But other people will say, white people will be like, no, I don't see it anywhere. I don't see it written down. And so you writing this book actually is really important for building that kind of scaffolding, because I felt it as soon as I entered, when I came from Zen from first from Zen and then to Soka Gakkai. And when I walked into my first tantric practice space, when I saw some of the symbols, I was like, I know this. This all makes sense to me. This is not confusing. This is not weird. It was new in a sense of learning the basics of, form and practice. And then when I entered the tantric path officially, it was like, oh, this was like a homecoming. And so I feel like you've done a tremendous service for us all by explicitly, putting these two particular paths together. There's other work, the Black and Buddhist volume just came out by Sheryl Giles, edited by Sheryl Giles and Pamela Ayo Tunde. And of course, Jan Willis, wrote a book on being Black and Baptist and Buddhist long ago, Reverend Angel, Lama Rod. But this particular kind of from a practice lineage, like philosophical and theological view, not just an experiential view, I think is so important, because I have a couple of students who their main practices are in West African based traditions, and they feel very drawn to Tantra, and they don't know why. So I've given them this book, and I give them your name, and they're like, oh wow, this is and I tell people, it doesn't have to be one path. For me, it's like the tantric path plus the recovery. That's been like, what? That's been mind-blowing. And there's a whole movement of people and practitioners and different organizations. And I think that is where the juice is like, we need many teachers.
Yes. This is like infinite skillful means. This is infinite like, skillful means.
People always like, choose one path. Yes. And when you go deep into a path, what you realize is it opens up.
So
you know what I mean? So that so I wanted to ask you yes, please.
Can
please,
I don't lose that question, but just
it's written down.
There's so many, like, I actually have to go sort of back through some of the things you said, what occurred to me. This notion of, depth when you go deep enough. Yeah, there is a danger of dabbling for sure. And there's something about, our wisdom guiding us, and, do need to know, when we're dabbling and when we're going deep. And I agree with you. that when one goes deep enough, things open up. So I just want to, underscore that. And to your comment about some of your students feeling very drawn to Tantra, some of your students whose primary practice is West African based, and they feel very drawn to Tantra and don't know why. When I think of the wisdom beings of Lukumi, which is based in West Africa, who are called Orisha. And I think of, the energies that we engage, Yidams, Dakas, Dakinis, in Vajrayana practice, and the multiple ways that they communicate, the multiple ways that we engage with them. The similarity to me seems obvious. Now, the interesting thing, there's 97 million things to say about what you said. So one of them is, what happens with white dominant culture. And I wanted to, and the ways that white dominant culture is engaged. And I want to say that to say, okay, white people, whiteness. Yes, there's ways of engaging. And then there's white dominance. And there's white dominant habits, which make it so that other ways of being, seeing, understanding, communicating, analyzing, knowing, etc., become relegated in a value hierarchy. That's what I'm talking about. So it is no wonder, given anti-Black racism, it is no wonder that folks who may have come to Buddhism through how it came to the West, this hemisphere, how it came to the West, through the experiences largely of white folks. I mean, it is what it is. I'm not saying anything wrong with it. Thank you.
Yes.
And also the multiple ways of engaging practice and tradition and lineage through the sense fields and the life experiences of people who are engaging in the world in different ways. It just makes sense. It's of course, and now that, more folks are sort of waking up to the legacy of whiteness and how that has impacted how we understand just how to be in the world. Again, I'm not saying there's something wrong with whiteness. I'm saying there's something about white dominance, which has sublimated other ways of being, seeing, knowing, and doing, either to invisibility or to, a minuscule. Do you know what I'm saying? So there's this sense of, the multiplicity of ways of engaging phenomena and reality being authentic, legitimate, visible, viable, recognized, without having to battle for it. So I just had to say that. Just as
it's so true. It's like there's no one way of being. It's like, when you travel for the first time, even when you don't leave your country. Like I remember being a young child, and I was born in the North, but my family is, of course, from the South, right? The Southeast US, and going down South, as many of us who were born in the North did, during the summers, and just the way of life being recognizable, but very different. In terms of pace, in terms of a value system, in terms of communication. There was more, the Blackness felt richer. It wasn't it wasn't diminished, even though, in our minds, it's like the South is so racist. But then you go down, and I remember being shocked. I was like 13 and went to visit my cousins in North Carolina, and they were like, well, there's a Black mall and there's a white mall. And I was like, oh, gasp. And then
wow.
Right. But I was like, oh, well, at the Black mall, you don't experience racism. Right. Even though it's segregated. And I was thinking about my experience going to the mall in Connecticut or in New York, and the experiences I would have, right, of being, followed.
And what you have to do. Yeah.
And what you have to do, how you have to shrink yourself and,
the
do all this, the shrinking and the twisting and the, and that's white dominance, right? And how that, at any form of dominance, contorts everyone,
right? And this goes back to Gyu, Lung, Tantra, the movement of Ashe. What happens when one contorts energetically? Literally, we're contorting the body, we're contorting our energy, we're contorting voice, we're contorting vision, what I'm even allowed to see and notice. And allow myself to feel and experience.
It's like when you're sitting.
Express.
It's like when you're sitting, right, in a posture. And I'll sometimes say to students, okay, hunch over.
Ooh, how does
Okay,
that feel?
lean back. Okay, just do whatever. Well, what happens to your body? What happens to your mind? What happens to the wind? And it's not about rigidity. It's about setting yourself up
Mm-hmm.
to relax,
Yes.
to be your authentic self, is for your natural wisdom to arise, whether you're laying down or standing or walking or sitting. And, of course, it's like, well, I'm sitting in the Vajra position. Okay, the position of enlightenment, but it's also about stacking your body so that it's not, you're not hurting yourself. You're not cutting things off.
Mm.
And that kind of simplicity, as you were talking about, the simplicity that leads to profundity, the simplicity of feeling, the simplicity of sense perceptions. I think about how I remember, I think it was a Rinpoche, but maybe it was a Zen teacher who said that he regretted how he first gave instruction when he came to the US, like in the 50s or the 60s. It must have been a Zen teacher, because he didn't realize that Westerners, white people, would see the breath as like at their nostrils, rather than as a total system. And so the breath became this thing that supported
Cerebral
concept.
Aha.
It wasn't even your whole, it was like, and that, people I was like, your breath doesn't begin and end at your nose or your mouth. And so when I give the instruction people to feel the body breathing, they're like, that's what you do all the time. That's what you do all the time. They're like, whoa, crazy town. And I'm like, the breath is outside of us. It's not something that's contained. And if it is, we're in trouble.
Right.
Right. People who have breathing problems will tell you.
Yes, we will. Yes, we will. Yes, we will tell you. Yes.
We'll tell you, you don't, I want the flow.
Right. And we talk about body, speech, and mind. So speech,
right.
Speech, energy, breath, same set of phenomena, right? We talk about this, so in Tantra, we might talk about unleashing or transforming, or getting the kinks out, right? In Dzogchen, we talk about allowing. We talk about relaxing enough so that the knots untangle themselves.
That's right.
That they naturally go back into their natural open flowing state. Right. Do you see what I'm saying? So that feels really, really powerful. So this is what we're relearning, right? This is what we're all trying to relearn together, and supporting and encouraging, and being the tail in one another, the tailwind for one another, and relearning and recognizing, right? We talk a lot about recognition in Dzogchen, and we can talk about reconnecting, at other levels, right? From what has been apparently lost, but isn't. It's been obscured, right? That's the word we use all the time, right? It's been obscured. And so we're trying to refine. We're trying to refine. It's already there. We're just trying to refine. We're not inventing nothing. We're not trying to make up nothing. We're just trying to get reconnected, re-aware of, refamiliarized with the nature of reality, which is open and spacious and relaxed and kind and profoundly creative and brave, fearless. Dauntless, undauntable, cannot be constrained, but is always precisely, specifically kind in an exact way.
Yes, that's right. Kind, not nice.
Yeah.
Okay, which kindness.
Yeah.
So we're wrapping up a little bit. I mean, this is so great. I'm like, part two. I want to do part two, but this is a big question. So maybe I don't know. Anyway, but
let's try it. Let's see what we do.
Let's try it. What are some misconceptions about both Lukumi and Vajrayana that you would like to dispel or invite folks to investigate, or
Thank you.
what? Yeah.
Thank you. I'm taking notes to myself if folks haven't noticed. I keep
great.
going on and off of mute so I can take notes and remember. I appreciate that. So you're right. It is a big question, and it matters, and it's important. And let me just sort of see the one or two that emerge first. I'll mention one. Actually, I want to mention three things. For the record. So wonderful. I just feel so happy. I can't even say enough about it. I do. I feel just really deeply moved. In all of this, we are all practitioners, right? We are all hopefully trying to do our best, doing our best, and at times we falter, right? We make mistakes. So, this connects back to the notion of, guru and teacher. Yeah. So in all of this that we're saying and that I'm saying here, take the essence of it. Take the essence of it. It is for certain that I have not always been a perfect embodiment of these things, but I for certain try my best. So I'm gonna say that, and with every hope and wish for everyone. So one of the things that comes to my mind about misconceptions is this notion of what is deity, and how is deity engaged with, and what does that mean, and how does one engage deity in non-dual ways? And you'll know from the book, we talk a lot about yanas, which we haven't mentioned here.
It's very interesting.
We haven't mentioned the term yanas, which matters. So for viewers who are not familiar with that term, yanas refers to vehicles of practice, modalities of practice, which have to do with what experience one is having of reality, which then dictates what then is possible in order that you can do with practice. Yana is not just about what methods you're using for practice. It's about literally view. We talk about the word view or vision, which refers to what is the experience, what do I think reality is? Yes. At some yanas, reality seems like things are out there, and there's other things in here. There's a relationship between me and other things, me and other people, me and beings, me and deities. And so the relationship with deity, wisdom beings, Orisha, in the language of Lukumi, would be one of they're out there and I'm having an experience in here. And so maybe I propitiate, maybe I honor, maybe I petition, maybe I ask for help or support, right? So that is a relationship that one might have with deity, this notion of out there. At other yanas, with other relationships with reality, the notion of outer and inner changes and becomes very much non-dual. Such that, I am having a conversation. There's something called Sheryl that's having a conversation with something called Shanté. Right. So I am having an experience that there's something, something else, that there's something other. And also, to talk about Orisha, so say Shango, I'm going to talk about, the name of one Orisha, which this is not a lesson on Shango. So there's an experience that I can have of my own Shango nature. And I can also have an experience of Shango, the king who realized his own liberation in the process of his own death. He realized his own enlightenment. That is what happened. That's how I would phrase it in a Vajrayana way. Literally, in the moment of hanging, he became enlightened. He literally realized his own. And I can actually experience that inside of myself if I'm experiencing it in a more non-dual way, or I can experience him as an inspiration. If I'm saying, do you see what I'm saying? Like that could be an inspiration, and or I can have that as an actual lived experience. Wow, I can actually embody that. I can experience my own Shango-ness.
Yes.
So it's important, I think, to understand that along the yanas, one's relationship with deity changes.
Yes.
They no longer are just out there. There is an in here, and there's a both and experience. I also would not say, on the Buddhist side, that some people there's a way that to be brief, because you'll cut me off in a minute and be like, we gotta go, this is over, it's time, it's over. There's a way that I've experienced some teachings on occasion, perhaps it was my own misinterpretation of deity or wisdom beings in Buddhist practice as being shying away from the out there aspect and only experience in here. So the way that one does deity practice in some aspects, of my Buddhist lineage is some folks could misinterpret that I'm being delicate because we're not in a long conversation, so that we don't have time to unpack this. It's important to not do dualism either as only out there or only in here.
Yes.
That's my point. This is my point.
And I think that's really helpful. I do, you were talking before about monthly practice. So I do a monthly practice, open monthly practice. And right now it's just rotating between 3 practices, but that'll probably, as the seasons change, that changes. And one of them is White Tara. And it's very, and some of the students are familiar with tantric practice and visualization, and some aren't. And I'm like, but White Tara is open to everyone who's received the transmission for it. And there's a lot of struggle with, it's like it's
a pedestal. It's pedestalizing.
Pedestal, and then maybe some of your glow will get on me. And then there's a little bit of, like, I would say, hoarding, where it's like, I'm gonna, and I'm like, yeah, right. And so all of that is like, really like, it goes back to what you were saying about kindness and like this gentle way of working with our experience, right? Because either, putting it out there or hoarding it are also doorways to, wakefulness. So it's like, I love how the tantric path, and I'm assuming from, friends I've talked to, that the Lukumi path is like this too. There's no escape. You're not like, well, I hit a dead end here because I'm really bad at this. It's like, no, that's what you're practicing with. You're practicing with your, small, making yourself small. You're practicing with your hoarding quality, because that's the seed of your wisdom. And I really appreciate that so much about that, this lineage that I'm in, because it's not like you failed, started. It's like, okay, that's the texture of your experience, right? As you were saying. And so, and that's where your wakefulness is. That's how it's trying to come out that way. Fine. It's going to use, like I have
by any means necessary.
I have this sacred, right? I have this sacred work for show. I have this sacred world, drawing this, or someone did, that I got at a retreat of like 5 or 6 years ago. And I always think about that, like everything is sacred, right?
Yeah, that's the Dakini. That's the Dakini.
That's the whole thing. That's it, right? That's like the Dakas, that's the Dakini. It's the whole thing. That's the Harukas, that's the Mahakalas, that's the whole kit and caboodle, and that it's like, and then that's also where teachers and horizontal relationships and Kalyana Mitra come in, spiritual friendships, so that I'm not fooling myself. Oh, I'm doing everything it's that I'm really working. And I appreciate so much the depth of your wisdom, and that, that you're bringing that, the depth of your wisdom and your practices to a world that desperately needs it, right? And it's like, it's not separate, right? It's all sacred, so I just want to thank you for that. Yes, please go ahead.
No, appreciation for that. And I just want to, one thought on something you were saying about the pedestalizing, just back to the misconceptions, and maybe it's the cautions, but there are stages of practice. Like you say, we are where we are. So practice will meet us where we are. And, there are stages where like they say, even in Vajrayana, there's stages where the guru is up here.
Yes, right.
And then as you continue, mind meets mind.
That's right.
And as you continue, similarly, my experience with Orisha, there is a time when you're on, it's Orisha, and it's like this, yes. And then there's like, there's an awakening that they're trying to do inside of this. So they're like, do you see me now? Do you see me? Do you see yourself? Do you see now? Yes. So, what we're talking about, the all in here is, we're tempering, the arrogance that can come like, I'm da-da-da, or the groveling and the self-effacing that can come from, I could never, No, from a Dzogchen perspective, enlightenment is what is. That
Mm-hmm.
is what is. There's
That's
no
right.
escape. One
That's
cannot
right.
not be that. Now we
That's
can
right.
be confused about it, and therein lies practice. I will say that my approaches to Lukumi, just for the record, my experience is that my understanding of Lukumi, I believe, are for many people heretical.
Mm.
Just to be on the real, like the really real. Now, in recent years, and I stopped my practice with Lukumi community some years ago um, because of some very challenging experiences with in community who were like, oh no, I'm not trying to hear none of that. No,
Mm.
they're not trying. I don't under, like where my own practice, I was seeking and needing different things, and other people wanted to stay in a approach to practice that met them, perhaps. And in
Yeah.
recent years, all over the country, I have talked to people, many, but people even from other countries reaching out to me and saying, listen, what you're doing is the way I think about things, but I've never found anything like that. Is it
Mm-hmm.
still possible for me to practice, Lukumi or an
Yes.
African-based tradition in this way? But all the people I know who are practicing aren't doing that. And so this is what I'm interested in, folks who with honor and respect for the people, the ways that people are practicing their traditions
That's
and
right.
lineages. I am doing what I'm called here to do, with no disrespect to others, but we're not trying to have no madness.
Right.
Right. We don't have to do things the same way in
That's
order
right.
to honor one another's journey. And this is not distortion of the lineage, it is meeting people where we are. And this is what is called wisdom. And it's so long as I have blessings and permission and supports to do this, and I'm trying to do my best to embody kindness. I'm going to keep on doing that, try to doing my best. But I would not say my approaches are common. That's what I would say. But it's wonderful to hear that more people are like, yeah, but what is that? And so I'm like, where's my people? Where y'all at?
Yes.
Come on, let's do something. Where y'all let us go, people? Let's do it. When it's time, and things in its own time, nothing premature. I'm talking fast because I'm like, am I supposed to be wrapping up?
Well, that's great. And on that note, I want to thank you so much, Dr. Sheryl Petty. Please check out her website, Ocha Dharma. That's OCHADHARMA.org. It'll also be in the notes and emails that go out. And please feel free to keep up with us on Linktree /Weekly Dharma. And I'm going to also remind you for the Donna request, if you want to offer a heart gift for Dr. Petty, you can please reach out either to Weekly Dharma by email, info@weeklydharma.org, or go to my Linktree, Shanté, what is it? Linktree / Shanté Paradigm. This will all be included in something that goes out with in the email that goes out with the video and with the posting. So I want to just thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for
So much
teaching us, for
appreciation.
being here, for having this conversation. Looking forward to hearing more from you.
Thank you. Much
Thank you.
gratitude. Thank you.